is a graphic from Science magazine. And what this depicts is on this side here, this is simply the increase of carbon in the atmosphere. This represents the drawdown of carbon eventually into the lithosphere. And one of the interesting assumptions about this, and we're kind of learning as we go, one of the assumptions had been for a long time that carbon, the residence time of carbon in the atmosphere would be relatively brief. Maybe a matter of decades to a century to no more than 2 centuries. Turns out that's not so. And you can find that the evidence was in the 3rd and 4th IPCC reports, but nowhere brought into a single focus. This comes out of a study done by David Archer called The Long Thaw. David is a geophysicist at the University of Chicago. He starts that book by saying the climatic impacts of releasing fossil fuel carbon dioxide to the atmosphere will last longer than Stonehenge, longer than time capsules, longer than nuclear waste, far longer than the age of human civilization so far. Each ton of coal that we burn leaves carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere. The CO2 coming from a quarter of that ton will still be affecting the climate 1,000 years from now. In other words, this isn't something of short duration. We're crossing thresholds that will be, insofar as we measure time, permanent changes in the way the Earth works. Global warming? No, that's not what this is. This is planetary destabilization. Sea levels will continue to rise for at least 1,000 years. Were we to stop emitting carbon immediately, seas would rise for 1,000 years. Temperatures would continue to increase for 1,000 years. Seas rise because of thermal expansion of water and also because of melting ice. Storms and storm severity will get larger. Disease and famine will spread in places where they're presently unknown. Drought and heat waves will get larger. Ecosystems everywhere will change. Coral bleaching now affects half the corals in the ocean. We expect that number to rise as oceans become warmer and ocean water becomes more acidic. Climate isn't something over here in a little box called climate change. It will spill out into politics and economics. The death toll, according to the World Health Organization now, is 150,000 people each year die of climate change-driven weather effects. So here's what we know. We're already committed to a substantial warming that will take us very close. Even if we do nothing, if we were to stop emitting carbon immediately, the inertial momentum of carbon emissions will take us very close to a point of no return. There is a lag between what comes out of our tailpipes and smokestacks of about 30 years. That lag will shrink to 20 years as ocean uptake of carbon slows, and that process has apparently already begun. It's too late to avoid trauma. So talk of climate solutions and so forth simply misleads. It is not. I'll come back to that point in just a minute. The UN projects something like 250 million to 1 billion climate change-driven refugees by the year 2050. Not far out, long lifespan of students in this room and the students that you teach. The duration of this is not a matter of decades or centuries. We're now talking about changes that are effectively permanent as we measure time. Al Gore, I think, had it right when he described this as the first planetary emergency since we've been on the planet. Now, I doubt that there is any one of you whose heartbeat has gone up a single beat or whose palms are sweating. And the problem we have, and I want to spend a little bit of time thinking about this because it's reflected in several parts of this talk. If I were to get down behind the podium and pull out a Uzi and kind of slowly meander toward you, I'd have your attention in ways that pretty slides don't get it. And what would happen is your evolutionary history, your fight-flight mechanism would kick in big time. And so you'd be headed for the doors or you'd be rushing me. But simply numbers on a screen don't get it. We're not wired to think that way. We are really, really good if it's big, hairy, long teeth, and dependably loathsome. Years ago, if you're old enough to remember the Walt Kelly's cartoon character, Pogo. Pogo was a possum that hung out in the Okefenokee swamp, and Pogo was meditating about environmental problems back in 1977, and Walt Kelly has Pogo say, "We've met the enemy, and he is us." So it makes it a really tough problem to reckon with. This is not something like Adolf Hitler or Osama bin Laden or whomever that we can project our fears and anxieties and aggressions on. This is us, it's you and me. All of us have a carbon footprint. So we have an issue of high probability of catastrophe. It's long term. Costs occur now. Benefits would occur if there are benefits later. Responsibilities diffuse. All of us in the room bear responsibility. The political interests, as you all know here, run counter to the change in the system. And then it's an issue that is political, moral, technical, economic, all of these things rolled into one, which makes it difficult for those of us trained in the academy, living in our little silos, to think much or think carefully and well about. It spills across everything we do in education. The upshot is this. And this is hard, especially for those of us in Western civilization, and I think people in the U.S. in particular, but this is not a solvable problem in the way in which we typically think about problems being solvable. If I've got a broken transmission on a car, that's a fixable problem. But climatic change, by its very nature, is not. We are creating a different planet, one different from the one in which we emerge as a species. We are evicting ourselves from the only paradise we've ever known, this 10,000 or 12,000 year period that geologists refer to as the Holocene. Now, what that means, however, is if it's not solvable, it is still, we hope, containable in terms of its scale and its scope, if not its duration. That's the best that's left to us. What's this mean? Well, 6 meter sea level rise on the East Coast. It takes out most of the East Coast cities. We had a little warning case called Katrina with New Orleans. We didn't do very well with that test case. We know the temperatures will continue to ratchet upwards. This is Al Gore's record. We now have a very good record, for example, that goes way back here, 620,000 years. If you weaken the evidence a little bit, it goes back another 600,000 years. We know how the Earth works physically. We know that growing seasons will change dramatically, that where I live become a whole lot more like the state of Georgia in rather short order. Things are melting on the planet. This is the South Pole. The study just recently, this is a graphic from Nature magazine. Seas are continuing to rise. There's 20 feet of sea level rise in Greenland, 20 feet each in the east and west Antarctic ice sheets. This is what is coming up. You can download just infinite number of pictures about sea level rise and so forth. So that's the picture. What do we do? Let me get down to 15,000 feet. This is the President's Climate Action Plan. The group has got together beginning in the summer of 2006 and began to wrestle with what does the next president of the United States do, be it Democrat or Republican, but the assumptions we had at the time, given all of what we now know about the science, time's not our friend. That we've got to move very quickly. You can go to the website and download most everything here. It's www.climateactionproject.com. You can download the whole document that we passed off to the president. It was about that thick. We had an analysis of presidential powers relative to climatic change, what can the president do with executive orders and so forth. So the whole thing, 13 chapters, we looked at everything that the president would have to know and do. The short kind of Cliff Notes version of this was the first ebook done by St. Martin's Press by the director of this project was Bill Becker, who did a terrific job. And then, very briefly, this is the debate going on in the States right now. This is business as usual, totally unacceptable. This simply takes us over the abyss. Each of these colored slices is a different climate bill. What we are proposing, or what we proposed to the president, was this, very sharp reduction, so that the reductions in carbon emissions are what, in the lingo of the time, we call front-loaded. So we get a lot of reduction by the year 2020. And then we taper down to not less than 80%. The current Waxman-Markey bill has it at about 83% if that passes intact. And then we can talk later if anybody's interested in the kind of the policy wonky stuff about how you do carbon emissions and why a cap and trade versus, say, taxation and so forth. There are a lot of details in this that are probably not relevant right now.